You're tuned into the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I've actually got a special guest, my daughter, Madi Snyder. She's an athletic training student in her grad school years of Pacific University. We'll get underway in just a moment, but before we do that, go to my website, rockysnyder.com. Check out all the continuing education offered for chiropractors, athletic trainers, physical therapists, strength coaches, and personal trainers, plus blogs, podcasts, archives, and a whole bunch more. Be sure to put in your calendar July 16th to the 19th, Kansas City, Missouri, when the NSCA 2025 National Conference is going to be happening. I'll be putting on a few presentations there myself, so I hope you can join us. And if you can't there, well, maybe you can also perhaps join us August in Providence, Rhode Island, the Perform Better 3-Day Functional Summit. One of 3 are going to be occurring, Chicago and Long Beach being the other ones, but I'll be presenting there as well. In the meantime, follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and enjoy the show. Well, this is a treat. We're keeping it all in the family. Madi, thanks for coming on to the Zealous podcast. You're really the first family member I've had, I think, except for brothers from another mother or sisters from another mister. You're actually blood related. So
Yeah.
welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Very excited.
Yeah. So, okay, tell the listening audience where you currently are right now.
So right now I'm in a little town called Forest Grove up in Oregon. I am completing both my bachelor's in science as well as my master's in science. I am going to Pacific University, so I am kind of hopping between Forest Grove and a little town called Hillsborough.
So it's a 5-year track where basically you got most of your undergraduate requirements handled in the first 3 years, and now you're into your graduate program for the final 2. Is that more or less the way it goes?
Yeah, basically, I got a lot of my classes done my first 3 years. I have some final requirements that I'm wrapping up right now, actually. We have one thing that's considered, we call it our capstone, which is a year-long research or just project, or during our senior year, and that's something that I have been working on a little bit during my first year of grad school. So I got to do all of my gen ed requirements, all of my requirements for grad school done in my first 3 years, and now I'm getting to do a bunch of cool grad school stuff. And they have created this really awesome 3-2 program. So I am able to concurrently finish up my senior year while doing my first year of grad school.
Oh, so it's okay. So it's kind of like the overlap in a way, isn't it?
There's some overlap. Yeah, exactly.
And now I haven't gone through that kind of program myself. So is that common these days for people looking to be getting their master's in athletic training?
I know that we're not the only school that does that, but I'm not quite sure how many other schools do it. I know that this was part of the reason I came to Pacific was really because of this 3-2 program and opportunity. And I know that when I was looking at colleges a couple years ago, there were a couple others that were doing it, but not to the same level. And this has just been super streamlined and they made it super easy. There was very little extra work I had to do to make sure everything was transitioned.
Okay, so obviously I'm your dad and you grew up in the gym more or less, but so I know perhaps I might have been an influence on you, but I'm not the only one, right? So what inspired you to follow this track?
It's kind of a long story, but I've been involved in athletics since a very young age. I played soccer for many years. Once I got to high school, I picked up football for a couple years, and that was when I really had my first interaction with an athletic trainer, quote unquote. Our athletic trainer at the high school I went to was a PT, so she was busy most of the days during the week, and I could recognize that while she wasn't a athletic trainer necessarily, I really liked what she was doing. So California has some weird laws around athletic training, which basically allows anybody to practice, which gave her the awesome opportunity of being on our sidelines and working with us. But it gave
Wait,
me kind
what's the weird things about California?
so it's under there's some legislation being passed right now. It's like in the works, but California is the only state where anybody could call themselves an athletic trainer. So you don't have to be board certified, you don't have to be licensed, you don't have to do any of that. You can be a PT, you could be an EMT, you could be an English teacher, and you can call yourself an athletic trainer in California.
Wow.
So, there's not a lot of high school athletic trainers in California at the public schools because it's not an expense that a lot of schools deem necessary in
Mm.
terms of having a full-time athletic trainer when you could easily have somebody who has some availability during the week to come in. So, seeing that, growing up with that definitely skewed what I understood an athletic trainer to be. But after recognizing that she just got to be watching a game and there to help out with injuries, and she got to do all of the biomechanics and kinesiology and all that fun stuff behind how we move and like how to make sure that we're performing the best. I realized like those are a combination of everything I want to do. So I did a bunch more research and learned that there are programs, and unfortunately at the time that I was ready to go to school, I couldn't just breeze through with my bachelor's degree. It used to just be a bachelor's degree um, certification. You could take your board certification right out of your bachelor's degree, but now it requires a master's degree, which is how I landed up Pacific. So it's
Got it. And
a
so
long
for
story.
No, no, that's good. And so the quasi athletic trainer slash physical therapist, her name's Jenny Putt, and we've had a podcast episode in the past with her, and she's gone through the Gray Institute Gift Fellowship. So if you're new to the world of functional fitness and you're unfamiliar with the Gray Institute and Dr. Gary Gray and his Gift Fellowship, I highly recommend you looking into it because he is the godfather of functional movement and functional fitness. And he offers an 11-month program, almost like an internship, in which she went through. And it's just a phenomenal program. And to take that to the high school level makes all the difference in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So
Yeah,
you
she was
got to
amazing.
watch her in action. You saw her that she was amazing. And of course, you just being the bull in the china shop on the pitch or the soccer pitch and playing field with all love in my heart. You needed her services at times.
I needed her quite a bit. She was also the only other girl that was ever on the sidelines with me for football, and so I think that that was also a bond of like that was someone I knew I could relate to and I know I could trust, and like it was really nice to have somebody, another woman on the sideline with me. And she helped me out of countless situations. I always had stuff going on with my ribs and my shoulders to this day, like so many breathing techniques she taught me I use every day. And she just had a really big influence on a lot of us as athletes. She was with us the year we went to state, which was awesome. And so just being able to witness all of that and realize that although I realized myself as an athlete did not have a professional future as much as I might have wished, I could still be involved in athletics and still be on that sideline and be involved with the coaches and the athletes. And it was just the perfect career for me.
Well, you fit in well with the majority of the guests come on the show who love athletics, love sports, and realize somewhere along the road that maybe the professional or Olympic level wasn't in their future as a competitor, but there's still ways to participate. And so, well, that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back just generally in the last few years with your undergraduate. Of course, having the influence of a gift fellow from the Gray Institute and living under my roof for a bit and seeing the stuff that we do here, did that how did that unfold for you in the studies you had to take in your major during your undergrad?
It was challenging, actually. I
Why?
felt conflicted a bit at parts because I was lucky enough to come experience one of your workshops back in 2022, I believe, maybe it was 2023. And I learned so much in 2 or 3 days and absorbed so much information that I might have received during an entire semester that sometimes it felt hard to go to class because although I understand I need a degree and how important that is, I love the hands-on experience, and it was so much easier for me to learn that way, and it was so much more efficient. It was hard to justify to go to class sometimes. But at the same time, I have now recognized how much I have learned just from like actually sticking to the books. There's a lot of great things to be learned from just reading as well as doing hands-on. And now where I'm at with my grad program, we do a really great job of our professors will lecture, and then in that same class period we'll move to our lab and we'll perform those skills or perform the observation, whatever we're practicing. And so we're able to read and learn and take notes and learn traditionally and then apply it hands-on, which is beautiful. But yeah, it obviously has taken me quite a bit to get to that point, and I'm definitely a hands-on learner. So not being able to just take 3 courses and have my education be done was hard. It was hard to realize that I had to go through 3 years of undergrad before even getting to the point I am now.
Mm. And now you're doing more hands-on by the volunteer work that you're doing too, because you've got residence or clinical hours that you have to accumulate as part of your degree.
Yeah, so one of our classes requires us to get 160 hours of clinical work. They assign us at a location. Last year, I was at a high school, or last semester, I was at a high school. This semester, I'm at a small NAIA university in Portland, and then I'll be at a high school starting in March, actually. So we had a long 16-week clinical rotation in the fall, which was our first rotation, and then we have two in our spring. So they're each about 7 weeks long, and that is also great because I'm actually seeing real patients and I'm able to implement stuff that you use. I've pulled out the wedges. I've got to blow some people's minds with some small things, and so it's allowing me to kind of integrate what I hear from you and everyone in your world as well as everyone in the textbook world. So it's kind of a beautiful little mash of things.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so just give me an understanding a little bit, if you would, about if there's a difference between the college level athletes and the high school level athletes in regards to the maybe the injury rates, the things that you're having to deal with in one level versus another. Is there any difference there, or is it basically the same?
So there is definitely a difference. I can say that the experience I'm getting at this university right now is definitely unique. It's a very small university. It has about 150 athletes total, and I'm
Mm.
really only working with 2 teams, basically 3 right now. And unfortunately,
What
the
sports?
school I'm working with men's and women's basketball as well as our track and field program, and
Okay.
the school is unfortunately closing at the end of the semester. So it's a very unique situation that I'm in because we have so few athletes and because people are starting to pack up and get ready to go on. So typically in this time of year, especially with college athletics, I'd probably be seeing some of our fall athletes as they start to get into their preseason, their off-season preseason training would be starting right about now, but I'm really only seeing the athletes that are in season. The women's basketball team I'm working with has 6 athletes. So, you play 5 and we have 6. So it comes down to just making sure that they can hit the court and they can be okay. Um, Versus at the high school I was at in the fall, we had countless athletes. I can't even keep track. I think we had probably close to 5 to 600 athletes that we were dealing with. So it was completely different. And I had 6 or 7 sports I think that we had going on. It's football. We had football, girls and boys soccer. We had volleyball. We had cross country. We had cheer. I think those were the 6 we had. So it's a
Wow.
very different experience between the high school and the college. So because the sheer number of high school students, I was having a ton more injuries and I was seeing a lot more people day in and day out. We had a lot of knee injuries, unfortunately. We had a lot of concussions. And now at this university I'm at now, I've had one knee injury. I have not seen a concussion yet. And we've had potential some shoulder injuries, a couple ankle injuries, but nothing to the degree that I was seeing at the high school. But I think that's mainly just because the reduced number of athletes.
Sure. Okay, so as a strength coach, there's going to be common injury sites that we're going to try to reduce the likelihood of occurring through program design primarily, and that could involve a whole bunch of things. But as an athletic trainer, how do you view one sport compared to another? Are you doing the same kind of needs analysis in ways? Are you looking at, okay, this basketball inversion sprains are going to be one of the number one things here. Football, we're looking at concussions and knees, or like, how is that laid out?
Yeah, so everywhere I go, typically I carry a little bag with me that has kind of my emergency medical supplies and then some basic supplies that I use. And that will change depending on what sport I use, just at the very basis. Like if I'm covering basketball, I'm gonna have tape, I'm gonna have electrolytes, if I'm at the college level, I might have some Advil, ibuprofen kind of thing. But I'm usually keeping it pretty light. Basketball typically doesn't need a lot during game time. Before a game, all I'm doing is taping ankles. Everyone wants bilateral ankle tapes. That's all you see me doing. However, if we're covering football, I am going to have a lot more blood related stuff in my kit, so I might have a lot more gauze, a lot more bandages, more tape, a lot of gloves. With wrestling, all I seem to carry is a bunch of blood stuff, so I want to make sure to just carrying that kit is the first thing. And then further on, the injury, preparing for what we're going to see. With the high school I was at, we brought the same supplies everywhere we went. So we would always go with our AED, our vacuum splints, our crutch bag, and then our big med kit. So that never changed depending on what sport, but you did have to prepare for different things. So as athletic trainers, we create these things called EAPs or emergency action plans, and we write one for either each sport or each venue. And that is a really big part of what we look at in terms of like what injuries we're looking for. So we want to have for football, we always make sure that we know how we are going to handle somebody that might have a severe head injury or a C-spine injury. That is going to be the same throughout all the EAPs, but we're going to focus more on football because that's where we're going to see it more. With soccer, it's a lot of knees. It's unfortunately a lot of concussions, a lot of ankles. Soccer is one of those games that people will just keep going and keep going, and it's a lot less frequent that I'm out on the field where they're able to get up and get themselves healed. They usually want a lot of management stuff. So they want stuff like I'll bring massage guns and we'll bring foam rollers and we will bring tons of biofreeze because that's the kind of stuff that they want. So it depends on a mix of the where you're at, the athletes you have, um, and the sport. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. That was really well done. So I'm curious too about like JUCO and high school level sports and the role the athletic trainer plays, because most of the time I'm talking my guests are like Division I NCAA or in the major leagues, and they have the resources at their fingertips to create a medical and training staff. So there's at least one athletic trainer, if not more. There's at least one strength coach, if not more. There's usually a couple of physical therapists, there's a nutritionist and dietitian, there's a complete team, and they have weekly meetings, if not more frequently, to discuss the athletes in the team situation, what's coming down the pipe, who's in the rehab process returning to performance, or what sleep cycles are like, who's going to be red flagging as somebody that we got to watch out for. So at your level, and being kind of the putting in clinical hours, volunteering at that, is there anything like that environment, or is the athletic trainer just keeps to their own office and is more or less secluded from the strength coach, from the sport coaches, and from the rest of anybody else that's working with the team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as a student, I often I get to be in those conversations, which is great. And usually those conversations are between me and my preceptor, whoever the athletic trainer is there. I have not been at a site that has more than one yet. So those meetings are typically just I'm saying, hey, how is this person doing? What do we need to check in on? what has changed since I saw you, since I've seen them last, since I've been here. And then usually that can be extended to coaches. Coaches are often in the our training room checking in on their athletes, and our relationship with our AD is also really, really crucial. It's something I've been learning is a good athletic director cares about their athletes and wants to know how they're doing, and they want to support their staff, which is our, their athletic trainers. So I have not been in a place where we've had scheduled meetings per se. Granted, I am in school during, from usually I'm in school from about 8 to 2. So that might be when some of those meetings are occurring. But I'm there for more of the informal check-ins before the game, saying this is, this person went to the doctor the other day. How are we feeling on this? I constantly check in with coaches if somebody gets injured during the game and we're ready to send them back onto the court. I will communicate with the coach and let them know what's going on there. But in terms, a lot of the coaches also are strength and conditioning coaches. So here at Pacific, as a student athlete, we never had a strength and conditioning coach who was only a strength and conditioning coach. They always were coaching other sports or involved in other ways. And that's my experience at my sites so far. We haven't been as lucky enough to have the amount of resources to have people that are simply nutritionists, simply strength and conditioning coaches. So the availability of people, it's hard to meet all the time, but we do little check-ins whenever we can.
Got it. Okay, now you mentioned sports in Pacific. So, just as a background, you grew up primarily playing soccer, swim team, and when it came to soccer, being in the net as a goalkeeper was one of your main positions. And with that, you were tackled more or less by attackers coming at you, and so that was a lot of blunt force. And then you decided, well, that's not violent enough for me, and I'm going to play football at the high school level. And there is a concussion or two potentially there, and a few bruised ribs and whatnot. But then you get to the college level, and you're saying, I just want to step it up a little bit more because I don't think that was violent enough for me, and my mom's hair is still not quite the shade of white I'd like it to be. So you decide to hit chicks with sticks, otherwise known as women's lacrosse. And uh, eh, how was that, first of all, transitioning from football, full contact, to lacrosse?
So it's a great question. Another thing about where I was raised in the beautiful city or town of Santa Cruz is that women's lacrosse did not have a presence in that town and when I was growing up. Now you see high schools around the town popping up with teams, which I think is awesome. But the only lacrosse that I was exposed to originally was men's lacrosse. So, I had a very unique path of becoming a student athlete. I did not have the intention to. I had full intention to focus on my academics. And then I ended up first freshman year, I played on the soccer team, and then my goalie coach was the head lacrosse coach, and so she basically said, "I need athletes," and she gave me a stick and goggles, and I showed up thinking that I was gonna hit people with sticks really hard, like they do in men's, and I was ready for full pads and all that, and then I realized it's a completely different sport.
Oh, what a
Um,
letdown.
and no, I am so glad that I did not get myself into men's lacrosse because I just became obsessed with women's lacrosse. It's such a fantastic sport. It has so much finesse and so much technicality, and yeah, so I got myself involved. I definitely got bruised up a little bit through that, but that was a fantastic experience playing a sport I had never even really been around before. And now
Okay, and with that, and I kind of, lightheartedly said about concussions, but you have sustained several. And so normally when somebody gets an injury, and maybe it's a recurring injury, they become somewhat of a knowledgeable resource when it comes to those things. And it's no surprise to me that your capstone is involving something dealing with blood flow to the brain. So give us a little understanding of what you're thinking about in regards to research in your capstone.
Yeah, so I think I confused you maybe a little bit, which is fair
Uh-oh.
because it's confusing. So I have two things going on. One thing is counting as my undergraduate capstone. However, I did not truly do any human research. I did a critically appraised topic
Oh,
that I can speak on, but then actually doing like a thesis capstone for my graduate program that is 2 years long. So I'm actually doing research um, that will be hopefully done on human subjects. We are going through a process of submitting our proposal to do research right now. However, um, in the fall, I completed a critically appraised topic on the effectiveness of mild jugular compression on reducing concussions, and specifically in high school football. So I Actually, if I don't think I have it up here, but I do have one of those devices around here somewhere, but I don't think it's within reach. But basically, a there's this device, the brand name, the most popular one right now is it's called Q collar, and it's a simply a collar that goes around your neck and compresses your jugular vein super, super mildly, not enough that you can really tell a difference. It takes a little bit of adapting to play, but the thought is that it's increasing the amount of fluid in your brain and therefore giving your brain less space to bounce, because we know that a concussion occurs right when the brain is hitting the skull because of a force of, a fall, direct impact. And so the thought is by increasing that pressure, the brain will have less space to move, and hopefully won't hit the skull. So I did read a bunch of literature, did a bunch of research, and most of the studies I read were about they would test on high school football athletes, and then they would put the athletes through an MRI preseason and postseason, and they would look at the changes in the athlete's white matter, because that was really what that's what they were looking at. Like if somebody had great white matter changes, that wasn't the greatest thing. We don't like a lot of change in somebody's white matter. So the lower amount of change, the better. So what they were able to find is that there was a decreased amount of change in the white matter. However, one study I read in particular basically said we had 21 concussions in the group that wore this device and 21 concussions in the group that didn't. So the concussion numbers did not necessarily go down, but it looks like it potentially had an effect on the severity of the concussion, which I think is really
mhm.
awesome. I have unfortunately been quite negatively affected by concussions, and still to this day I sometimes am. And I think it's really important that we get education and we get devices and potential, not that we can truly ever prevent a concussion at this point. We have not found anything that will truly prevent a concussion, but I think even just this Q collar is in very, very beginning stages. It's been released to the public. The public can use it, but it's only been used. You'll see it often in women's lacrosse players. If you look hard enough, you can see it on football players. But that's only been for the last couple years. So I'm hoping in the next, 10, 15 years, they'll become either, they'll get better and there'll be more research out about it, or we'll find some other options.
Right on. Okay, for the listening audience, I will share some little personal, intimate information that you were born in a delivery room here in Santa Cruz. And while your mom was going through labor, I had the TV on in the delivery room and I was watching the Patriots against the Dolphins. It was September 29th, 2002. Patriots lost, unfortunately, to the Dolphins, as we often do sometimes. I can't figure that out. But nonetheless, so I'm saying this because you were actually born under the sign of an actual Patriots logo, literally. And from that moment on, you have been a diehard Patriot fan. And unlike myself, your entire life except for the last couple of years, has you've only known a
Success.
dynasty of championships almost year after year. I don't know if you understand how fortunate you are, or how misled, I guess you could say,
Oh,
because
trust
now
me.
reality is coming into play, and you can understand the crushing blow to the heart that I sustained all the way until 2001. From basically the late 60s up to that time, including two Super Bowl losses, one to the Bears in '85 and another to the Packers and Brett Favre in the '90s. So I bring this up because at one point in time we were talking, and you had this dream of being an athletic trainer and standing on the sidelines of Gillette Stadium. But we haven't talked about that in a while, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's changed, not because of the winning record or lack thereof in the last two seasons, but just because you have different insights and your experiences now. So where where are your goals now? Like if I said, where's Maddie Snyder going to be in 5 years from now? Do you have that 5 year plan and knowing where you want to go?
Honestly, no. I
So it's changed.
It's changed. It's
You're not
changed.
letting me down. I just want to let you know.
And
I'll find free tickets to the Pats games no matter what.
I'm not saying that's completely off the table, but I have had some I really, really enjoyed my time at my high school rotation in the fall. Granted, it was one rotation and it was one high school. So the more rotations I have and the more experience I get to build up, the more I kind of will figure out what I want to do. But I really enjoyed the high school setting. I loved working with athletes where I could kind of mold them to my expectations to make sure that they are polite and respectful athletes, that they are not scared of athletic trainers. So many kids, so many athletes are terrified to step foot in the athletic training room because they think that means that they're not going to step foot on the field. And so teaching at a young age that we want you to play and we want to see you succeed and we want your team to win, we want our team to win, I think is really awesome because when I get to college and I'm still seeing kids that are 24, 25 that don't want to come in and see us because they think it doesn't mean playing time. It's hard to get that out of their mind. So I like the idea of being able to kind of set those expectations in the high school, and I just had a really fun time there. I have not had an experience with an NFL or professional team yet, so I can't speak to that. But what I can say is through my education, my professors do a very good job at describing expectations. And when you get to those really high levels, D1, professional, so on, it becomes your entire life as an athletic trainer. And I'm not sure if that's really where I want to be, right? Like I am super interested in this, but I don't know if I'm willing to give up 100 hours of every week and my half of my soul to, be on that sideline of Gillette Stadium. I think that I would rather be able to help influence and direct and guide a younger population. I got to see countless kids commit to D1s at my high school rotation, which was such a beautiful experience, and seeing that all the hard work that they put in is actually like paying off, and getting to see that pure excitement was really exciting and really awesome. And I think also after a certain time people stop celebrating the little things, and I love celebrating the little things. So I don't know if pro sports or D1 is what I want to do and if that is what's calling my name. The other thing that I've been recently learning about that I was not educated on was the amount of presence that athletic trainers have in clinical settings. So we
Such
recently
as.
Yeah, yeah. So we recently had a guest speaker come in, and she works at an ortho and fracture clinic at one of our local hospitals. And so she gets to scrub into surgery, and she gets to prep grafts and prep hardware of things that people might be getting inserted into them or added, given their inserted into them in surgery. So she's prepping that. She does a lot of patient education. She came in and taught us all about imaging. And then we also recently had a guest speaker who works at a concussion clinic and as an athletic trainer. And he sees, I think it was around 15 concussion patients every day. And they range from the super young kid with the playground accident to the 80-year-old grandmother that tripped going down the stairs. And so as a typical athletic trainer, we're seeing an athletic population. So the concept of seeing a non-athletic population is also super intriguing. So I'm not sure if I will have the opportunity to do any type of rotation with that, but I'm definitely interested in that. Not right away. I really want the excitement and the sidelines, but it's not it's pretty easy to get burnt out in this career because it demands so much of you, but you have these clinical opportunities that could, present a 9 to 5. We also see I have a professor that works um in with the army as an athletic trainer. And she does a lot of their rehab and their return to whatever they're doing. And it's really cool to see how many things you can do as an athletic trainer.
Yeah, I think I agree. The field has really diversified and widened considerably. I mean, we just sit on the other side of the Santa Cruz Mountains from Silicon Valley, and as I understand it, many of the .com industry businesses over there hire athletic trainers rather than physical therapists even to work with work-related injuries or issues. And it could be quite lucrative because, I mean, honestly, it, the fact that a master's degree is now required for athletic trainers means that you have to invest more in your education than you did previously for roughly the same income. And so there's now that it's diversifying, there's places where you're going to make more than the average athletic trainer that might be within the sports realm itself, if that makes sense. Because
Absolutely.
this is not a Fortune 500 kind of career we're talking about,
It's
but it could
not
be.
it's not it could be, but it's not, and funny enough, it's not at the pro or the D1 level. The most amount of money you're gonna make as an athletic trainer is gonna be in that high school setting or as an educator. So, it's a little weird, you would think it would be the opposite, right? But everyone wants to work in the pros, right? So, the demand is not as high as it is for high schools. There's a lot of rural high schools that will pay you double the amount that a college will because they need somebody badly.
Well, and the nice thing too, Maddie, is that I'm reminiscing about a conversation I had with Al Vermeil. Al, legendary strength coach. He was the strength coach for the San Francisco 49ers during the 80s with Joe Montana, Steve Young, and all their Super Bowl championships. And then, like that wasn't enough. He went to the Chicago White Sox and then got recruited to the Chicago Bulls when Michael Jordan was there through the 90s. So he's got so many rings on his fingers from the NBA and NFL. It's crazy. And his brother Dick, he was the head coach when Kurt Warner and the Rams won the Super Bowl in 99 or 2000 or whatever that year was. He and I were talking about, what job was it? He said, Rockets, I really wish I was still at the high school level. I really got more out of working with the kids at the high school level. It was great to be there in the championship years. Yeah, working with those top level athletes, but you influence so many other individuals in younger lives when you're working with the high school. And I hear that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just know also that Jenny Putt, my athletic trainer in high school, was amazing. And I just wish that she could have been there every day, right? So like I just know that if she could influence me as much as she did only being there once or twice a week, I think it would be really cool just to be that person and be able to help the kids. Yeah.
Okay, give me a breakdown of your favorite classes right now and the ones that are your least favorite or in the past in this journey over the last, say, 4 years.
Oh my gosh, in the last 4 years. Okay. I think one of my favorite classes I got to take was actually the quickest class I took. One of the cool things about Pacific is they offer a a term in January. We call it Jan term, and we don't start the second semester in undergrad until almost February. So there's 2 to 4 weeks in January that kids you can come in and take classes that is already included in your tuition, and they're obviously very excelled because it's only 2 or 4 weeks. And so I got to take this short 2 week class back, let's see, it was last winter. It was like last January on the psychology of injury. And that I makes me wish I studied more psychology in undergrad because it was fascinating, and it has played like the knowledge that I gained from that course has altered how I approach a lot of my athletes now as a student. I have a better understanding of what they're going through mentally, and I often actually tape athletes solely for mental reasons. There's many an athlete that comes in and says, "I know this doesn't do much, but I need this one strip of tape right here because I broke my ankle 3 times, and this is where I need my strip of tape." And I've learned that that is actually incredibly valid and real, and putting that one strip of tape actually could prevent an injury, even if that one strip of tape isn't physically doing anything. So that was one of those classes that just blew my mind. I loved that class. Least favorite class. I I really don't know what my least favorite
You
class. I
just
don't
don't
know.
want to throw a professor under the bus, is
No,
really what
no,
you're
because
being very kind.
I could say right now that strength and conditioning is so brutal because I just had a midterm in my strength and conditioning class that it was insane. I studied so hard and for so long, and it was brutal. It was really brutal. But I also really enjoy that class because I like what we're learning. So I really don't know if I don't know if I have a least favorite class. Like it's I really am enjoying all of them. Even like our research class that everyone in my cohort will dog on, and even my research professor will dog on. It's really good information to know. So I think as my brain develops too, I'm able to have a better perspective, and I don't have to be as negative about the hard things.
Right on.
Um, but
Okay, well, you mentioned strength conditioning, and that's challenging, but this is gearing you toward taking the CSCS exam later this year, correct?
it is, yeah, it is. If I can pass that test, that's the thing. I have a lot of studying to do. I need to read that textbook cover to cover like 3 times at least.
Okay, well, that's good. And is that a kind of a common certification for athletic trainers these days? Or I know for physical therapists, they often will go out and get the CSCS because it creates more well-rounded understanding of movement, program design, yada yada yada. But what about athletic training? Is that something that's kind of common or not?
Um, I can't totally speak to that. I haven't met a lot of athletic trainers necessarily that are there CSCS, but I know that there are plenty. But I know one of the people that is a year above me, a second year, took the strength and conditioning class that I'm taking right now and went on past his CSCS and is now CSCS. So I know of one other student that has done that so far. But I assume there's a lot of other people out there. However, it just depends on the setting often that people want to go into. And sometimes that's just not people's cup of tea. You know, we as athletic trainers get to do so much that some people really love the rehab portion. Some people really love the modality portion. Some people, everyone has their own cup of tea, and sometimes it's just not strength and conditioning. So I'm not sure percentage wise or like how common it actually is, but it is recommended. It's recommended because it a rounds us out nicely. It is the gold standard for strength and conditioning, and so it's very highly regarded. And because we don't make a lot as athletic trainers, it is another thing that could potentially help increase the amount of money we're making.
So high school strength coaches could also serve as athletic trainers. I know California, there's no requirement for the athletic trainer, like you say, but other states, is that something that if you know? And if you don't know, big deal. But do you find that strength coaches and athletic trainers at high school or JUCO level are one and the same?
Um, yes and no. I at the high school I was at, nobody was CSCS. The people that ran the strength and conditioning, I don't believe they were CSCS. I could be wrong, but I think they had some other certifications. I'm not quite sure what those were. And they would often come in and check in with us and say like, "Hey, Larry with his back injury was in and he tried to deadlift this morning and I told him he couldn't and he needs to come check in with you because that's not okay." Right? So there is communication like that. At the high school I was at, the strength and conditioning classes were happening as a zero period when the athletic trainer was not there. So there wasn't necessarily a presence when performing strength and conditioning activities. Now at the university I'm at, there is definitely some crossover. There's check-ins, but neither of my preceptors were CSCS so far, and so they'll provide rehab, but they won't necessarily provide past the last phase of our rehab, which is our sports specific movements, right? So we get them to being able to move back to their sport, but our strength and conditioning coaches typically take it from there. I haven't experienced a lot of communication.
Okay, so that's on the training aspect, but what about like the medical side of athletic training? So I'm thinking like EMT and paramedic.
Mm.
Uh, are, is there interest in that? Is there a carryover? Do athletic trainers pursue getting their EMT certification or becoming a paramedic? Because honestly, all of you athletic trainers are the first responders when things go wrong. So it would just seem to make sense that that would be something to pursue too. Is that?
Yes and no. It's not, I don't know how, I know a couple people that have done both, both like an EMT paramedic route and an athletic training route. However, we do a lot of work as athletic trainers communicating with local emergency responders and creating good relationships with them. The biggest difference and the issue is at the high school level, athletic trainers, we cannot administer any type of medication. So the nurses at the high school, they can do, I'm not sure what they're allowed to do at the high school level, but I can't even so much as give ibuprofen. So if I were to become an EMT, I don't know what that would if that would change anything with what I'm allowed to do. But there's not that big of a necessity for, I don't feel a big necessity for me to go out and get my EMT certification or license because anything that I do that is going to require, anything that happens that's going to require a call to 911 or EMS, I will be fully capable of handling the initial stages, as you were saying. So I don't think that there's a need. Usually the EMTs will come in a lot of the time, for just transportation, right?
Got it.
So a lot of the time, if someone goes down and they break their femur, I can, if it's, I won't reduce that, but I can splint it. I can do everything but like pain management, basically, right? So that's the biggest thing is the pain management aspect is really iffy. I don't know what that looks like at the high school level. Um, and the more that we develop as athletic trainers, the more versed we're able to, like the more we're able to do, right? So um EpiPens are something that is typically a prescription medication. However, it doesn't have to be, right? Like an EpiPen is an EpiPen, and if Jerry has one and Larry goes down, Larry can use Jerry's, right? So athletic trainers are now able to carry their own EpiPen. I had a situation at the high school. We had a student going into anaphylactic shock, and we were lucky enough she did not have an EpiPen on her. But my preceptor did because she was allowed to carry one. So if she was not able to carry one, and that was not allowed, I could totally see someone becoming EMT if to make sure that they could have that. Because if we weren't able to have that EpiPen, I'm not sure how well that person would have done. Luckily, they were able to make a full recovery because the epinephrine was administered quick enough. But it's those little things like that that the more we can advance the athletic training world, the less I think someone needs to pursue extra extra education. I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but I think that we are very well versed in handling those first few moments that the EMTs are usually getting there quick enough that we don't need to be able to do what they do.
Very cool. Okay, that makes me come up with like one of the last questions here because the time has flown by. Eh, Most gnarliest experience on the pitch, on the field, on the court so far in the young career that is burgeoning for you.
Oh gosh, I gotta think about that.
No
Mm.
one's leg's been ripped off, so no avulsion. You had the
Well,
EpiPen
and
incident.
actually, in high school, I did see an open fracture. I did see some bone poking through skin, but that was in high school. That was way before I started my education.
Okay.
Um, but the craziest thing, like I've handled, what have I seen? A lot of, what have I really?
ACLs or nothing beyond that.
I've seen,
Everything's
yeah,
been
plenty of
rather tame.
ACLs. I had a basketball kid who I swear just absolutely shattered his forearm the other day. I just thought I heard it all go. And he was fine. That was kind of crazy. But what is the craziest? Okay, I guess it was so a couple, let's see, about a month ago, one of the athletic trainers locally in Forest Grove, I did my observation hours with her when I was in undergrad, and she works at the local high school, and they were hosting a wrestling tournament and needed some extra coverage. And so myself and a couple other of my people in the cohort, we all went over to the high school and helped cover a wrestling tournament one night. And that was a lot. There was just a lot of blood, a lot of things going on. And then at the end, towards the end, the last like the final couple rounds of matches, an athlete 2 mats away from me um got taken down. I think actually she performed the takedown and appeared to potentially fracture her rib with what appeared to be maybe some L4 involvement as well. And she was just in some of the worst pain that I've seen. So navigating that, communicating with EMS, calling them in, she was being handled, she was under control. I was kind of just observing when somebody from another mat ran over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We need them. We need them." And I turned and there was somebody whose C-spine was being held by the athletic trainer of the high school. So at the same time, we had EMTs on one mat and the mat right next to them. The EMTs then had to run over to the next mat because this girl had a potential C-spine injury. So back to back communication, it was a very weird situation that everything happened within like 20 minutes of each other, and we had two athletes that were transported on two different ambulances within 20 minutes. So that was
Wow.
really bizarre and brutal to watch just because I think they were both like this was a really large tournament, and I often don't see those if they're not your home team's athlete, you're often not going to see or hear about them again. So I hope that everyone is okay. I think that everyone was okay, but again, you just kind of have to send them off and hope for the best, which is a little that's I think the weirdest part is hoping that these people are okay, but that was very brutal. Just turning my head and realizing that somebody was also experiencing a horrific thing. Yeah.
Sounds like Burning Man almost. Okay. So we're at the end of our time zone here, and this has just been wonderful to have a conversation with you and share a little bit more about your path and where you're going through. Because to be honest, most of the guests are already embedded into where they're going, and a lot of the listening audience are people like yourself that are looking to follow their footsteps and understand it. But to actually have somebody that's in the process of it is quite unique for this podcast. So thank you for sharing all that. And you've got one more year left in your graduate program, and then the world's your oyster. So Maddie, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. This was awesome.
Well, that's another episode in the books. I want to thank Maddie for coming on. God, I love that girl. In the meantime, before we go to next week, go to my website, rockysnyder.com, get some continuing education information. Perhaps, well, you can check out the blogs and the podcast and a whole bunch of my services there. If you're looking for CEUs, that's the place to go. Plus, you can also go to the NSCA National Conference. Again, it's happening this July, the 16th to the 19th. Reservations are available right now, so be sure to register, and I will see you there. And hopefully you can register for the Perform Better 3-day functional summit. It's where I gained a lot of insight and information over the years, and I'm just glad to be one of the presenters giving back. In the meantime, check out my book, Return to Center. Have a great week.